Hello everybody, my name is Moppski, and I am here today to do just a quick little conversation with you all about a topic that's been going on in the Siege community, I'd say for the past couple months here. So I just wanted to weigh in and kind of get my own opinion on the matter. The topic we will be talking about today is the one-shot headshot discussion. With this being the mechanic in Siege that states that any shot to the head with any weapon equals a one-shot headshot. We're just going to go over a couple things here, just kind of go over what the discussion is, what the solutions that are being presented, and what my opinion of that is. So without further ado, let's just jump into the explanation of the discussion. I'm not exactly sure how long this has been a discussion. I believe it's been for quite a while. But it's really started picking up after the Rainbow Six Invitational in 2019, at least as far as I've noticed. Maybe it's because I started paying attention to Pro League more. That very well could be. I really didn't pay attention to Pro League until the Invitational and since after. But I've been paying attention to Pengu's Twitter channel, and Pengu being a professional player for the team G2. He's one of the most prevalent and quite possibly best player of Siege in the entire world right now. And he has been making a pretty big case and campaign against the one-shot headshot mechanic in Siege, at least in certain places. I'm going to put a video up on screen here while I discuss it. This is a video that he posted to his Twitter, and basically what he's doing is playing some skirmish matches, and he gets a random headshot through the window, very common window to peek through to the bedroom, if I believe, on Coastline, and just gets a random headshot, you know, just spray firing to open the window. And he presents that as an issue to the game. He says there should be no way that I got that random headshot. And his argument is there's no skill to that shot. That player had just begun opening up the wall. That player had no idea how to get that he was there, had no idea how to move away. There was no tactical advantage on either side. It was just lucky. His discussion is to remove luck from the game overall. Which, I mean, to be candid, I'd kind of agree with. I'd rather have a skill-based shooter than a luck-based shooter, but it's a little more complicated than that. See, a lot of people are saying, I think I was listening to the Get Flanked podcast. I think it's called Hot Breach. He does it with Protege P and Rogue 9 and Get Flanked. All do the podcast together. And they were talking about how it's kind of a core mechanic of Siege to have that one-shot headshot. And I'd kind of agree with them. I mean, ever since the game came out, that's kind of been a thing. I remember when the game first released, the thing that made me stop playing it when it first started, I bought it day one. The thing that made me stop playing was the headshot multiplier on shotguns. If you shot somebody in the head with any one of your pellets with a shotgun, it would kill them. And that was insane. Obviously, they've since taken that out of the game for balancing issues, but that was just one thing there. So ever since the very beginning, you know, it's been a one-shot headshot with every single weapon. So I can understand the argument as being the case there, but we have to take a look at Siege to what it's become. It started out as a multiplayer game, a PvP multiplayer experience. However, over time, Siege has become a more competitive scene. You know, Pro League started almost right away, but it's picked up steam. I mean, Siege now has 45 million players, and I mean, no one really hops on for the story. I mean, there's people like me who like to read up on the story later on, but I mean, no one buys the game specifically for that story. It's not a generic title in that Tom Clancy Rainbow Six franchise. So we're not really looking at a game that is what it used to be, which was a casual experience. I mean, Ranked is right now their biggest game mode. Ranked is the biggest game mode right now. And that continues to be the case more and more season by season. I mean, even myself, me and my friends never used to play Ranked, and now we care more about our rank than ever before. Again, attesting maybe to how much we've been paying attention to Pro League, but I mean, the point still stands. So we are talking about a game that is, you know, extremely competitive. And what do we want from a competitive game? we kind of need to ask this question. Are we talking about a game of realism or competition? So I kind of want to compare it to some other games. Like obviously the top contenders as far as esports and competitive games. You've got CS:GO, you've got Dota, Call of Duty. Has been in the past. It still is, but it certainly doesn't have the scene that it used to. You still have the Halo Pro Leagues, things like that. These highly competitive games, and they tend to put realism off to the side. Now, a lot of people really like the realism in Siege, and me being included. I enjoy that it has realistic aspects. I would not say that Siege is a realistic game. Reinforcements are a huge point to that. You pull a deployable shield out of your ass, put it up, there it is. Or you pull a reinforcement for a soft wall. You pull that giant thing that clearly weighs, 50 pounds at least, if not much, much more, and you just put it up like it's nothing. We're not talking about a game that has extreme realism as it is. Even some of the characters' bios and abilities aren't realistic, and you can argue that they started realistic and kind of went more sci-fi as time went on. With like the addition of Dokebi, as Hacker Woman, as some people just call her sarcastically, which I totally understand. We have kind of entered into a sci-fi area, and it's less realistic than what it was. And that's neither here nor there. Dokebi's being one of my favorite operators to play. So I don't think Siege really started as extremely realistic. I think it had some very unique realistic elements, with a highly destructible environment, weapons that operated fairly realistically, operators with abilities that made sense. I think we started that way. I think it's kind of edged its way away from pure realism and more towards the air of competition. So with that being the case, are we thinking, should we go pure competition with something maybe like CSGO, where I don't know if a counter-terrorist would really get himself into the situations that CSGO puts them in? Are they really counter-terrorists, or just a generic soldier that you put into a map? At what point do we add that element? And I'm going to call this element the suspension of belief. Maybe the suspension of disbelief. I'm not exactly sure how to phrase it. But basically what this is, and the way that I described it in my head as I was writing down notes for this little video I'm doing here, was the suspension of belief is the point when you can kind of get the idea of the realism they were going to get across, and you suspend the disbelief or belief that realism brings. For example, I think at the point Siege is at right now, you can kind of see it. You're like, oh, okay, I can kind of see how that works. I think a perfect example of the suspension of disbelief that I'm talking about is like Marvel's Avengers, like the movies we're talking about here, how they have these gadgets and things that, while they're completely sci-fi, you can kind of buy it. What's coming to my head right now is that mask in Winter Soldier that Black Widow had, where she could kind of change her face into anyone she wanted. It's ridiculous. We all know it's not a piece of technology that exists in our world, at least that we know of right now. But at least we understand the concept. They do a good job of presenting it to us in a way that we're like, oh, okay, I understand. And that's kind of what we're talking about here with Siege. Vigil's ability, it's kind of silly. There's jammers for sure, but there's nothing that would make you completely invisible to a camera, at least that I'm aware of. Maybe I could be wrong, and if I am, let me know. But at least they did a good job of oh, okay, I kind of get it. It puts up these mirrors or this static around the drone that makes the drone not, or the cameras not notice him or something like that. They do a good job of suspending your disbelief of the gadget. And with reinforcements and things like that, you're like, yeah, we're not going to pull it out of our back pocket, but you could kind of understand a scenario where they might want to defend a certain area or a house or something, and they would have those utilities and gadgets and resources available to them, like deployable shields and things like that. They'd have those available to them. That's where it gives you that disbelief or suspension of disbelief. So pulling it back to realism versus competitive, would a one-shot headshot mechanic being removed. So in favor of a maybe 2-shot headshot mechanic, and we'll go over some solutions that people are bringing here in a minute. But like, if we were to remove that, does that kind of get rid of that suspension of disbelief? And I would have to argue no, personally. And I'll get into my opinion on the whole matter at the end here. But I think that we're not talking about a suspension of disbelief. I mean, if you look at some of the ways the characters are modeled, or like 2 speeds. I'm specifically thinking about 2 speeds and 2 speeds and 1 speeds. If you think about some of the ways that those characters are modeled, they have armor and headgear that would block most calibers of bullets that are being used. Now, you would still suffer from some severe head trauma, but it would save your ass. It would save your head. I'm thinking specifically of Chachanka's helmet in this instance. I mean, that thing's a big steel plate on his face, and he still gets downed in 1 shot. It's a little unrealistic as it is. So it doesn't really suspend my disbelief. It doesn't really get rid of the realism, as some people might say, for me. I'm not sure that's an argument that should really be put in place here, but I can kind of understand from that perspective, and I can certainly understand that it is kind of nice to get that lucky headshot that saves a round. Like, I'm thinking of a match I had not too long ago where I was pushing up on Skyscraper, and I got a lucky headshot on a Valkyrie that was holding a really tight angle, and that won us the round. We ended up taking out that Valkyrie that had been a problem for us the last round. And I mean, should that really be a thing in the game? I'm not 100% sure. But I think the realistic argument is not really something that's on the table. We are talking about a game that's competitive. So, with all that being said, I do want to bring to light a couple of the solutions that are being talked about that I've heard from different sources. Specifically, what I've been listening to is some pros talking about it on Twitter. Some podcasts from, like I said, that Hard Breach podcast is fantastic to listen to for opinions like that. They work with this game all the time. And just some YouTubers here and there. I'm not exactly sure my 100% sources. This is more of an opinion video than a research video. But some of the solutions I've heard is wall banging decrease in headshot damage. In that video I showed you from Pengu earlier, that would be perfect. I think that would be a perfect solution where if you shoot somebody through a wall, it doesn't immediately deal a headshot. I think it would kind of depend on the damage that the weapon does, how much the wood would block the damage, and things like that. But it wouldn't immediately dish out a headshot. And I kind of like that idea. I saw another clip on Reddit earlier today where a guy got 2 headshots through a wall and won a round just by getting those headshots through the wall because he sprayed to make a hole into objective. And I think that's absolutely ridiculous that he can do that. Do I think that he should have got one of those kills because they were in an unadvantageous position against a soft wall? Absolutely. But one of those teammates, those enemies that he was going up against, should have at least had a chance to react. And he didn't. There was no chance because both of them were dealt headshots. And, I mean, the guy wasn't even fantastic at his recoil compensation. One of those headshots was lucky in the first place. So I think if we had a system where the wallbangs don't immediately deal you a headshot that will kill you, we'd eliminate issues where we would get lucky shots through. It's one thing to be advantageous. It's another thing completely to end a round based on one mechanic that's been in the game since the very beginning. Another one that I've been hearing is headshot multipliers instead of insta-kills. So this is another thing that would base itself off of the damage that the gun does. I don't have any exact stats in front of me, but if I remember correctly, the F2 shoots 38 damage. So I mean, what if you did like a 2 times multiplier? Where the F2 gets a 2 times multiplier where you deal 70. Would that be 76 damage to the head with each headshot? It'd still be 2 headshots, no matter what character. But you would be looking at a multiplier instead. Call of Duty does this. Battlefield does this. I mean, most of our modern day competitive shooters do this sort of mechanic where it's no longer a one-shot headshot. I'm not 100% on board. I'd kind of rather just leave the one-shot headshot mechanic than do a straight multiplier like that. Now, I want to talk about this other one before I bring up a concept and an idea of my own here to this argument, or this, I suppose it's more of a discussion, to bring my own idea to this discussion. The other solution I've got here is caliber-based damage to armor and headgear. So this would be like if you shoot somebody in the head with a 9mm bullet, it is not going to do the same damage to that head as a 7.62 round or a sniper round or anything of that sort. You'd be more discussing, you know how we have in the game already caliber-based destruction on soft walls and destructible surfaces. You know, like a 9mm is not going to put the same hole in a wall than a 5.56 round. That's the reason why Jaeger is able to make holes much bigger than like a Doc, for example. I like this idea a lot. I like caliber-based, where it would make it would give a direct buff to DMRs, which already kind of don't see a lot of use at higher levels when you're taking yourself seriously. You know, those DMRs just don't have the same value. And I like the idea of caliber-based. I think that it'd be interesting, but I don't think it should be the only mechanic. I think, personally, if I was to give my personal opinion on all three of these that I presented, and I have my own idea that I put at the end, I think that a mixture of all three of these. So wall bangs decrease headshot damage. There's a headshot multiplier through walls, and a caliber-based system. So I think that a DMR should be able to kill somebody one shot in the head, no matter what round, no matter how you hit them, where you hit them from. But a 5.56 round's gonna put you down to 20 health, or just throw out a number, 20 health. And a 9mm is really only going to put you down to 40 health or something like that. I think it should be less than half if you get shot in the head for sure. But those are just random numbers to throw out there. There should be some sort of mechanic where you have the ability to react. And I mean, there's been some good arguments against this as well. I believe it was Rogue9 who said specifically, hey, this could make it so people can't win a 1v4 anymore because, sometimes they would depend on those lucky headshots to win those scenarios. You may be the best shooter in the world, but each one of those, each person in that 1v4 is going to be able to put bullets down on you. And by the last guy, you're one hit no matter where they hit you. So I kind of understand that. But I think that if we're talking about shooting through walls and a caliber-based destruction system, how you equip yourself is going to become more important. How you equip yourself for that 1v4, how you set yourself up at the beginning of the round is going to be very important. I like this idea. I think that if we're talking about through walls, definitely we should remove the one-shot headshot. And then this is my idea, my specific idea, maybe to add to the discussion. I like the idea of taking that realism, that suspension of belief or disbelief that I was talking about earlier, and adding it kind of to the operators. I think that certain armor and helmet types should take less damage. Maybe just as an idea. I don't know if we necessarily should do that, but think of it this way. Like I mentioned in an example earlier, Tachanka's helmet is a huge hunk of steel. Why is it that Tachanka can not take multiple headshots before he's taken down or stunned or that sort of thing? Or like Mira's got a very protective piece of Kevlar or body armor on. Like, why is she not able to chunk a few more shots besides just being a 3 armor operator? I think depending on the armor that the operator is wearing and their speed value, maybe we should look at making a multiplier where they don't take near as much damage. Just an idea. Obviously, I can see some issues with this. Like, that would require the armor that they design on the character to actually matter. And I don't know if that is going to offset certain characters. Mira has really good armor, but then, what about this other one speed? I mean, Gridlock's kind of a good example. She doesn't have near the armor that Mira does. And so would they design Gridlock with more armor just because so she could take more? I kind of see where that might be a problem. And my argument is more with headgear. I come from playing Tarkov in between when I was playing when I wasn't playing Siege, I was playing Escape from Tarkov, and there's certain headgears in that you can take almost any round in the game and not immediately die from taking that headshot. And I think maybe Siege could do with something like that, especially on their heavier operators. I mean, it's no secret that one speed operators need a buff of some kind. They are just really not viable. I mean, unless you're Monty, which you're behind a shield. But like Tachanka, the only one speed that I can think of that gets played all the time is Mira. Monty is played some objectives sometimes, but just not near as much as Mira. And Mira has an ability that makes it so she can see through things, gather a specific, unique type of intelligence, and within relative safety. You know, when she puts herself out there and peeks around a corner or peeks through the mirror hole or whatever, she puts herself at a severe disadvantage because of her speed. I think that having them be able to chunk a headshot or two would definitely give them a buff that they need, but would it make them overpowered? I'm just not sure. I think it'd be really hard to tell without putting all of these ideas through in the test server, even if they decide to do that. And really, to wrap this video up, I just want to make a opinion, my full opinion. I've given a few here and there through the video here, but my full opinion on it is I'm okay with where Siege is at. I mean, really, I'm not the most fantastic player by any means, and I sometimes depend on those lucky headshots. You know, that my crosshair placement was really good, and I got that headshot, and I won the round because going back to that Valkyrie situation, you know, I got that headshot because of the angle she was holding, and I just happened to peek her. I think, you know, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the game where it is in that regard. However, I would also be okay with changes like this. Changing the headshot multiplier, changing the wall bang. I would be okay with any of those changes, really. Like I said, I come from a background of playing a lot of Halo, a lot of Call of Duty. I'm used to be able to chunk a few shots before I die, and be able to heal myself, or, you know, let time heal me or something like that. So I'd be okay with it. I really think that we're talking about something that's not super important. I know it's a discussion that definitely should be had and definitely should be taken seriously by Ubisoft, because I mean, the pros are really concerned with it. I think that there's bigger issues. I think that there's glitches and bugs in the game that should definitely be fixed first before we try to change any of the core mechanics of the game. You know, like, for example, the Zofia and Ella sound bug. I run into that quite often when playing Zofia. I almost never play Ella, but I run into it quite often, and it's annoying. So I think issues like that should definitely be fixed before we discuss changing the dynamics of the game. But I think that this is a good discussion to have. And yeah, I think that it's good for us to have this conversation now when we're talking about a game that they want to keep running for the next 10 years. So I do really want to hear you guys' opinion. Let's open up a discussion in the comments below, just kind of going over this topic. If you completely disagree with any of the points I made, if you think any of those ideas sound good, just let me know. I'd really like to talk to you guys and engage in this conversation with the audience, with the community of Siege, because honestly, it's something I've been given quite a bit of thought to as far as the game goes. And yeah, I mean, that's really the end of the video. I want to thank you guys for taking all this time. I have shown 25 minutes right now on my end of recording. It may not end up being quite that long, but yeah, thank you for sitting through this discussion with me. If you guys do have any questions at all, any clarification, just let me know down in those comments below. And just to let you know as well, I will be streaming on Twitch, twitch.tv/Moppski. If you ever want to have a conversation with me over there, just come swing on by. Other than that, you guys have a good one. See ya.